Hello and welcome to Passing Priority. My name is Mike, and today I have a budget brew that looks to dominate the air and have our opponents scrying defeat. This deck has two commanders. Our first is Eligeth, Crossroads Augur. Eligeth is a 6-mana legendary Sphinx, costing 4 and 2 blue. Like most Sphinx, Eligeth has flying, and its ability makes it so that if we would ever scry any number of cards, we draw that many cards instead. He also has Partner, which means we can pair it with another creature with Partner. So to take advantage of this Scry replacement effect, we're pairing Eligeth with Siani, Eye of the Storm. Siani is a 4-mana Djinn monk costing only 3 and a blue. Like our other commander, Siani also has flying, and whenever she attacks, we scry X, where X is the number of attacking creatures with flying. With both our commanders, we can see how our deck wants to play. We want a lot of flying creatures that will allow Siani to trigger and want us to scry. But Eligeth instead will draw us a card for each of our attacking creatures. This is a budget brew, coming in at just $30. And as always, a link to the deck list can be found in the description. Being budget, don't expect to see a lot of the blue staples, as we would rather spend our money on fun, interesting creatures that don't normally get a lot of love. But this deck should be a fun, casual deck that steers away from the standard spell-slinging side of blue, being a very creature-heavy deck running a total of 38 flying creatures to go alongside our 8 combat aiders, our 10 protection pieces, and our usual accompaniment of ramp, card draw and removal. We will start with our mana ramp, and this is one area we can see that we have steered away from many mana staples. No Soul Ring or Arcane Signet will be found here. Fulfilling the slots of our fast mana rocks is Sky Diamond, Spectral Searchlight and Prismatic Lens. We also have Commander Sphere, Mind Stone and Letter of Acceptance, which can all be sacrificed when we no longer need them for mana to draw a replacement card. Unstable Obelisk is a mana rock that can double us permanent removal if we need it. Blue's answers to artifacts and enchantments are very limited on a tight budget, so they will either need to be countered before resolving, or this can be our way to remove them if we really need it. Mana Geode will scry on entering the battlefield, and Seer's Lantern can either be tapped for mana or to scry one card. With Eligeth out, these cards can easily replace themselves later into the game if we need more creatures over mana. Heraldic Banner will pump our blue creatures by +1/+0 and tap for blue mana as well. Ebony Fly is a cheap mana rock that can come down early to help ramp us, but for 4 mana we roll a d6. Then this mana rock becomes a flying insect with power and toughness equal to whatever we roll. Just make sure if you're putting this deck together, you have at least one standard dice with you for this card. Ebony Fly, also on attacking, gives another attacking creature flying. While we don't have many non-flying creatures, the ones we do have will benefit from this effect. And while on mana rocks that can attack, Ornithopter of Paradise is a 2-mana dork that later in the game can be used for our commander's ability. It's important to note that Siani triggers on attacking and not damage, so even with 0 power, Ornithopter of Paradise will add to the scry count and hopefully the amount of cards we draw. Our last ramp piece is Warden of Evos Isle. This 3-mana bird wizard reduces the cost of our creature spells with flying by 1 mana. So that's 37 creature spells, not including itself, it can make cheaper, and being a flyer means more bodies to swing with. With our ramp done, let's talk draw. While our main game plan is to use our commander synergy to turn our flying army into card draw, we will still need to include some card draw effects that we can use if we don't have both of them on the battlefield. Muldrifter is a very popular blue creature that draws 2 cards on entering the battlefield. We can evoke this out for 2 less mana, but we will need to sacrifice it if we do. But in this deck, its 2/2 flying body will provide us ways to keep getting card advantage over time, so we want to cast this for its normal mana cost. At the beginning of combat, if we control either of our commanders, Loyal Drake will draw us a card, and if we attack with 2 or more flying creatures, Tide Skimmer will also draw us a card. But even better than that, Windreader Sphinx will draw a card whenever a flying creature attacks. This even includes our opponent's flying creatures. Kefnet the Mindful is an indestructible flying god that has a mana sink that allows us to pay 4 mana to draw a card. While Fairy Formation for the same amount of mana creates us a flying 1/1 fairy and draws us a card, helping to fill our board with more creatures to trigger Siani. And while on tokens, Inspiring Sphinx draws us a card on entering the battlefield for each opponent we have, and for 4 mana makes us a 1/1 Flying Thopter. Our last card draw effect is the only non-creature for this section. Winged Words draws us 2 cards, but is 1 mana less to cast if we control any creature with flying, which in this deck we should manage most of the time. While not drawing cards, this deck can turn any Scry effect into a draw effect, as long as Eligeth is out, and while Siani can provide some Scry on combat, we have some other Scry effects we can use, which are all attached to flying bodies. Silver Raven, Fairy Seer, and Augur Owl are all low mana flying creatures that scry on entering the battlefield. Early, these can help set up the top of our library to smooth our early game, but later on, with Eligeth out, these cheap creatures replace themselves or even take us positive on the number of cards we have in hand. Sphinx of Foresight is great in our opening hand, as we can reveal it and scry 3 in our first upkeep. This can help make a slightly risky keep better, as we can look at 3 additional cards to make sure we hit our land drops or can develop our board early. This card also has us scry 1 on each upkeep. Again with Eligeth, this becomes draw an additional card each turn. Prognostic Sphinx scries 3 whenever it attacks, and is a hard to remove creature as we can discard a card to give it hexproof until end of turn. And Windrider Patrol scries 2 on dealing combat damage to a player. As this deck's focus on combat damage as its win condition, we need some anthems and combat tricks that will help us win. This is also the section of the deck that includes our only non-flying creatures. The first of those is Wingspan Mentor. When this creature enters the battlefield, we put a flying counter on a non-human creature we control. This grants the creature with that counter flying. Unfortunately, it can't put the counter on itself, so most times we will put this on a creature that already has flying, which grants it double flying, which as we all know does nothing. But Wingspan Mentor can pay 3 mana and tap to put a +1/+1 counter on all our flying creatures. Over a couple of turns, this can power up our army to have our small birds be able to take down dragons. Wingspan Mentor joins Windstorm Drake, Spirit Noble, and Favoured Winds as ways we can provide power buffs to our whole army. Wizard's class does not immediately provide a power increase to our creatures, but each level provides something we want. At level 1 we have no maximum hand size. Great if we're able to swing with our army with both our commanders out. Level 2 has us draw 2 cards, but it's the 3rd level that makes it so that each time we draw a card we put a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control. This means that with our commanders out, we could either add a counter to each creature that attacked, or add a counter for each creature that attacked to a single creature, like one of our commanders. So we can go both wide and tall, and maybe push a commander damage kill on a player. And getting our creatures through is a lot easier if we can get Archetype of Imagination onto the battlefield. This creature technically doesn't have flying like our other creatures, but grants all creatures, including itself, flying. Not that useful with our already flying army, but the best part is that it takes flying away from our opponent's creatures, meaning that we will be the only player with any creatures in the air. This pairs wonderfully with our other 2 non-flying creatures of Stormtide Leviathan and Abashan Cephalid Emperor. Stormtide Leviathan will make it so that only creatures with flying or island walk can attack, meaning that we can be less concerned about any retaliation from any attacks we make against our opponents. This large 8/8 also has island walk, and it makes all lands islands in addition to the other types, meaning this is an unblockable 8/8. Abashan Cephalid Emperor has 2 abilities. We can tap a Cephalid we control to tap a target permanent. This is our only Cephalid, but we can use this against a Voltron deck to keep its commander from attacking us. But its other ability allows us to pay 3 blue mana to tap all creatures without flying. This can keep any large ground army in control by tapping them down before they attack us, or by politicking with its controller to attack someone else. And while on our non-flying creatures, we have some creatures that don't fit into any large category. Aven Oddity can be cast as a flying creature, but can be cycled to draw a card and put a flying counter on a creature we control. We only have 3 non-flyers, but this can help get one of our more impactful creatures up into the air to join our flying army. Curiosity Crafter does make it so that each time a token we control deals combat damage to an opponent, we draw a card. We have a few token makers, but more importantly, this flying creature gives us no maximum hand size. So if we draw a large grip of cards with our commander's synergy, we don't need to discard any of them. And we have a few creatures that grow as the game goes on. Kite gains a temporary power buff if we have drawn 2 or more cards that turn, but Fairy Vandal gets a +1/+1 counter whenever we draw our second card each turn. But Anerophage is even better, gaining a +1/+1 counter each time we draw a card. and Thunder Drake gets a +1/+1 counter whenever we cast our second spell each turn. With our big board of flyers, we need a way to protect them, with special care given to our commanders. Siren Stormtamer, Cerulean Drake, Spiketail Hatchling, Spiketail Drakeling, and Spiketail Drake are all flying bodies that sit on the battlefield and can be sacrificed to provide us a way to counter spells. They either counter spells that target our staff, or force the spell's controller to pay a tax if they want their spell to resolve. Sometimes, having an opponent know you can counter their spells is better than actually having to counter them, as they may point their removal or other interaction elsewhere. Hypnotic Sprite, Silumgar Sorcerer, and Nimble Obstructionist offer us some versatility in either being counterspells, or we can cast them as their creatures and use them to help fill our flying army. Essior, Wardwing's Familiar, is another legendary creature with flying and partner, who we could put as one of the commanders for this deck. But Essior's ability will make it so that each spell our opponents cast to target one of our commanders will cost an additional 3 mana to cast. And we have Thrix, the Sudden Storm. This flying giant can be flashed in as a surprise blocker, or at the end of an opponent's turn to give it pseudo haste. But his other ability gives us a cost reduction on any of our other spells that are over 5 mana and makes them uncounterable. This does include one of our commanders, some of our best combat aiders, and our board wipes. And while mentioning board wipes, we will end by looking at our removal. On our tight budget, we can't run some of the best spot removal blue has, but blue has a lot of ways to shut down creatures without destroying them. Deep Freeze, Frogify, Ichthyomorphosis, Imprison in the Moon, Kasmina's Transformation, and Mystic Subdual are all enchantments that turn our opponent's threats into small creatures we don't need to worry about. Importantly, all these cards get rid of the creature's abilities, and unlike destroying the creature, our opponents won't be able to reanimate a creature or recast it if it's their commander. River's Rebuke is a Cyclonic Rift against a single player, a great way to take down an arch enemy without hurting any players that have fallen behind. Washout will bounce only permanents of a selected colour to their owner's hand. We never really want to say blue, but this card can deal with multiple threats under different opponents if they all share a colour. And Flood of Tears clears the board of all non-land permanents, but most times we will get to put any card from our hand back onto the battlefield to help us rebuild first. Add 32 islands and some utility lands, and that's it, our $30 budget flyers deck. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking this video, as it really helps support the channel. And if you are enjoying my content, I hope you will click the subscribe button and join my growing community. The deck list can be found in the description, and if you want to find a list of all the decks I have built for the channel, you can check out my website, passingpriority.com, where I have the deck vault, a list of all decks I've covered on the channel. Thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.